money and go back to embed and pay in. That's why there's an embed bill and there is a market operators bill. The issue of meter is a measuring device. Now, what have we done in this situation now? Between NEC and the discos, there is an arrangement to work out a refund modality. So at the end of the day, the customer has only helped you to make payments in advance, but the money is going back to the customer. This is one area where CAPME and MAP are similar. So we are just waiting, the discos are just waiting for the approval of the refund mechanism. Discos will not take the money from the customers and go away like that. Also remember that the reason why this has to be so is again the issue of liquidity in the sector. That is a fundamental issue which I know that the current administration is dealing with squarely. So the major challenge that is bringing about the meter asset provider and then customers advancing the money is the issue of liquidity, so that some funds can be freed for the discos to also deal with some other things. So the discos are not taking the money from the customers. In a nutshell, they are not taking the money from the customers and taking it forever. No, there will always be a refund. But as a regulated sector, we will always wait for NEC to blow the whistle before we can go ahead to do that.
Okay, everybody, Farekpe, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Thanks also for being COVID-19 conscious. We actually asked you to stay away so that we'll take you via Skype, because we're already going to have 3 guests with us here in the studios. And of course, you've always been our guest in the studios when it is safe, to have you. Thanks a lot. We'll come back to you. Let's bring in again Engineer Farouk Yabo. Engineer Farouk, listening to Dr. Joy Ogaji, there's something that obviously will be worrisome to any observer of the electricity sector in the country. The GENCOs, they are fulfilling their bargain of the contract between BPE and themselves. And Joe Gaji says, very respectfully so, and correctly too, that it is not their business to go and monitor others who also have contracts with the BPE on account of the privatization exercise. So, ramp up your generation. They are ramping up their generation. Whatever they generate, NBET is the off-taker. NBET pays for it. But in the meantime, we have this entire leakage in the system, which is why you continue to have the issue of GENCOs being owed so much. Why has it been so difficult to say, look, can we tweak this KPI, this performance agreement, to say we're having a problem. GENCOs, you guys are running a bit too fast and you are leaving the others behind. Can we revise it so that what is generated may be slowed down? You can ramp up your capacity, but what you then generate can then be such that can be wheeled out by TCN, which is like a laggard in the system, and then the distribution companies, which also have their own challenges. Otherwise, virtually on a daily basis, the GENCOs generate so much, and then so little is taken up, but so much that is generated is paid for by government, because MBET is a government entity. How do we deal with this kind of financial leakage in the system? And is Siemens likely to do it for us?
Thank you again, Kingsley, for an excellent question. Actually, relative to what we need, the GENCOs are not overdoing their work. Relative to what the DISCOs are able to perform, the GENCOs are overdoing their work. Now, if I go back to what the Honourable Minister said a little while ago, for a power system to be adjudged to be functional, you need infrastructure and you need to ensure high quality of service. How do you do this? This will involve increasing generation, increasing transmission, increasing distribution. But to do that, you need funding, you need investments. And how do you get this investment? Government has privatized this sector with the aim that government will not be funding it so that the market will fund itself. Unfortunately, Mr. Padipe has just mentioned that the biggest challenge we have today is that of the liquidity in the market. The power that is being pumped out up to the distribution levels or close to distribution level could not actually be translated into revenue, into cash that the entire value chain can be made. government had recognized this much earlier in the privatization, and that was why the idea of NBET, that is Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, was established to be the credit-worthy off-taker that will sign PPAs with the generators and sign besting contracts with the generators, with distributors. Now, having done that, it is expected that it's just for comfort, but the distribution end should ramp up and be able to do that, but that is not happening. So what is government doing about this? Government, Honorable Minister has just mentioned, we have completed a number of high-level generation or power infrastructure projects, which shouldn't have been the case if only the private sector are up to their job. Now, in terms of what government is doing to deal with this problem, already MBET is getting immersed into debts, starting from the Nigerian Electricity Market Support Facility by the CBN of about 213 billion, which has been absorbed, to payment assurance facility of 701, which has also been used to pay the GENCOs, and probably that is why the GENCOs are able to ramp up, because government has taken on itself to get paid to them, whether they work or, whatever it's the case. Unfortunately, on the side of the distribution company who signed the besting contracts with the embed, 3 agencies of government are expected to ensure that head or tail the distribution companies take responsibility and pay for their commitment. And these are NAC under the license agreement they have issued to this particular generation companies, distribution companies, and the Bureau for Public Enterprise, who anchored and midwife the sales of this asset through their shareholders agreement and through their performance agreement. And then embed through the besting contracts, where they are having that latitude to insist, because it's like you selling something to somebody and then you expect him to pay back, and this person has issued you some kind of guarantees. So there is really the need, and that is what the Honorable Minister has been saying, this issue of coordination, this issue of having to have a common vision, to understand that no one can work as an island within the current setup. We need to ensure that all these agencies are up and doing in terms of ensuring that they deliver onto that. Now, maybe before I round out on this point, what is government doing to deal with all of this program? You will be aware that one of the biggest challenge has been that of funding, because the private sector can't attract funding. So what government is doing is to bring initiatives like the Siemens, the Presidential Power Initiative, which is coming to ensure that those issues that are making the distribution company not to be able to get back their money are being dealt with. Already the market has accumulated large sums of funding gaps. And so government has created different BUPA zones, including a World Bank facility of about $1.5 billion, starting from 750, which is under the Power Sector Recovery Program. They call it P4R. Now, this is supposed to continuously ensure that the market and the tariff shortfalls difference are being managed, and the discourse are made to answer for the gaps in their remittances to both the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company and the market operators. And so what is needed is to breast up and ensure that everybody across the value chain, and indeed the customers, understand that the power sector of Nigeria is not really a government business. Government has since sold the entire power sector for almost 3 billion, and out of this they use more than half of the money to settle labor issues alone. And this is one of the biggest possibly wins for a government like ours. Many countries have tried to do this kind of system. They couldn't do it. Now the challenge is we have, in many cases, a number of little issues that we need to put together so that these things can work at the end of the day.
Okay. Kieran, it's fine. I mean, I know that you're itching to say something. But Engineer Yabo, the point is this. You say you are satisfied that the GENCOs are fulfilling their obligations under the contract. But, in performing their part of the contract, you can see that they are outperforming other players in the contract. The question I then asked is it not possible, I don't know whether you have a legal background, is it not possible to say, look, Joy Ogaji, you're a very great dancer, but your dance steps are getting a bit, too vigorous, for the others, for the drummers, who are also part of this. Maybe you can tarry a while just to review it. Because for every day, every minute that they generate, whether it is taken off by NBET or not, whether it is taken off by TCN, whether we get to use it, NBET will pay for it. And that becomes part of the debt. I'm sure you're familiar with Aaron, the electricity trading. Yeah. This is part of what led to the collapse of Aaron, apart from the speculation that they all had, which was one of the largest corporate failures in the US in the early part of this century. So why has government not sat back? Because they're working. Gencos are working. But, their work is almost becoming punitive to our national purse because we are not able to utilize what they are producing. So they're having high inventory. Unfortunately, you cannot store what they are producing.
No, this is exactly what government is doing. Kingsley, this is exactly the issue now that Mr. Padipe was saying government is trying to address the issue squarely. How do you address it? First of all, you need to dimension the problem. You need to dimension who is supposed to take what responsibility. You need to create transparency across the entire value chain. And you need to make sure that those contracts that are going to be killing, you prioritize those that are going to be easier for you. So as we speak, we're all aware of the Azura project. That particular project has a lot of contingent liabilities associated with it. And so government has made sure, of course, through the different transmission arrangement, that this particular burden is being taken overhead. But there are generation assets that incidentally are mostly owned by government, particularly the NIPP project, the NDPSC project, which are the ones now suffering. So the issue is that while we know we need even more power than generators are saying, we are still not asking. In fact, as we speak, there are a lot of efforts to make sure that we have additional capacity, because don't forget, we will not stay like this forever. If we decide today that we are going to stop it, we are virtually killing the entire. Of course, we all know there is direct correlations between the capacity of energy you can generate with your economic development. So we are having Vision 3030, for instance, a vision to have 30,000 megawatt by the year 2030, with 30% coming from renewables. We have the Siemens program, which set up to have 25,000 megawatt by the year 2025. If we constrain the generation companies, how do we get there? So the truth is that it's not an option for us to actually start thinking about constraining. Rather, we should ensure that there is contractual performance, there is need for payment of the right tariffs. We must graduate into a cost-reflective tariff that is efficiently delivered, not the one that you have 70% ATC and C losses, that is aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. We need to come to a system where we get to countries, similar to countries in Europe, where the losses are brought to the barest minimum so that the tariff can come down by themselves. But any issue that is going to guide us towards constraining generation because of failures of distribution, I think that is not going to be a long-term vision. We should rather, like the government is doing, take whatever decisions it takes. Whoever is on the line, get him out of the way and make sure that we have a common purpose, we have a common vision for this sector to move forward.
All right, Engineer Farouk, so we have to excuse Gencos in all of this, because the performance index is up there, and what you have understood, primarily, from all you've said, is the fact that the issue with the power sector is liquidity, no funds. It's as simple as that. And those who got into the business during the unbundling exercise got in there without having the finances to back up their claims. That's just the issue. Yeah. If you are breaking Siemens, is Siemens coming with money? That is the point. Yeah. If Siemens is coming with money, fair, of course, Nigerians will be happy for it. For now, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will continue this conversation. Of course, I'm bringing the Honorable Minister to speak on a number of issues. Stay with us.
as a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19. A corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 22 55 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live for the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, let's come back to our guest, Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Saleh Bama. There are two issues, but the first one has to do with this. Each time we point a finger at a discourse for their non-performance, they are unable to take this because they don't have enough infrastructure, we oftentimes don't remind ourselves that government itself is a shareholder. What has government done with its equity stake in these companies? I mean, if you are a minority shareholder, you can, assuming you are being oppressed, you can rely on minority oppression rules, to get things done. And if indeed, your equity is substantial enough, what is it that has been achieved? In terms of saying, look, discourse, what we are doing is not salutary. We need to move away from what we've been getting on. And I need to remind the Honorable Minister, the one minister former Minister of Power, Professor Nebo, at some point indicated that part of their target at the time for discourse was to ensure that their infrastructure for distribution was ramped up considerably. But we appear not to be hearing anything about that. Everything is meter.
Thank you very much. But if you remember from the initial, I told you the major problem of this sector to achieve is the infrastructure. And it is the government all this time, since the inception of this privatization, it is the government that has been taking responsibility of doing the infrastructure instead of the distribution companies who have 60%. It is now the 40% that are using the money to. You can see even the shortfall from the shortfall. The government, after generating, the GenCo generate electricity to the tune of up to 54 billion naira in every month. And it is only part of it, that is 15% of that money that GenCos pay. So the government always complete the shortfalls. It is the responsibility of the government. Instead of, say the whole infrastructure is in order so that they can get their money and then pay the GenCos. It is still the responsibility of the government. Whenever there is a problem in any infrastructure of the distribution company, it is the government that comes in and do the job of a distribution company. So that is the problem, and that is why government is saying, cement, come and do this thing once and for all, so that at the end of the day we now weigh what you did, and then we check and balance. That is the major issue.
Yeah, Honorable Minister, we're yet to get the details of what cement is going to be doing when they come, because I've initially pointed to the fact that the sector is privatized, largely privatized, and that Siemens is also a private entity, and it is coming to bring a kind of alignment, within the value chain of the power sector. And what I've just indicated is the fact that the government is still spending much money in this sector. This is a sector that has been privatized and government is still spending huge sums of money when there is a shortfall, especially when that concerns generation of electricity, as you have just explained. So let's bring in Dr. Joy once more here. You were itching to say something when Engineer Yabu was doing some expatiations on some of the issues. You can go to that as well as tell us more. We need to learn more about GENCOs and its responsibility and how perhaps the other partners in the chain could benefit from what you're doing, because of course if they do not function effectively and efficiently, what you're doing becomes useless to the country.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I wanted to respond to the question that Elder Kingsley asked my colleague on how, why the GENCOs, how we could come up with some viable or sustainable method of utilizing the power. There has been a lot of misalignment. The Honorable Minister of Power in his remark also mentioned that. And he also told us that he's working on those misalignments. I'm happy to hear that. There's a lot of misalignment. Now, the privatization, like I said, performance agreements were signed by BP, then NBET as the obligor or the off-taker was to sign a performance PPA with that is a power purchase agreement with the generating companies and vesting contract with the distribution companies. Now there is a misalignment and you want to know where is that misalignment. The original design of the market was that the vesting contract quantities which the discos will sign with NBET are just a vested quantity and they should not be the norm. They are like the exception to the rule. Now, let me break it down for Nigerians to understand. For those of us that understand the oil sector, there is what we call the DSO, or the domestic supply obligation. In 2010, the government found out that these IOCs are busy exporting their oil products, gas especially, outside to $8. And the domestic companies or the domestic consumption was suffering. So under, I think if I recall, Desiani term, they came and signed an MOU where the government decided a vested quantity. And they signed it with the IOCs that see, at any time T, this quantity has to be supplied to the domestic. Outside this domestic quantity, the rest, you're free to export it. The same thing needs to come to the power sector. That is the solution to this excess capacity as opposed to utilization. The generating companies have written to NBET, which is a bulk electricity trader. They've written to NEC requesting that, see, we are businessmen. We have seen that our power is increasing, but we are being restrained. From 2013 to now, we're nearly 7 years. And power is not growing. We have expansion capacity. If the market was running the way it should, by now we should be able to generate up to 20,000 megawatts. At least still not up to the demand. Because the system operator in TCN does a demand study. And their report shows us at today that the demand of Nigerians for electricity is 28,500. What we have available is 8,500. So you can see it's not even up to a quarter of what Nigerians want. But because of the bottlenecks in terms of transmission and distribution, we need to see how we can design a model. And I'm glad that the Honorable Minister is here, is listening. After this meeting, I don't mind meeting with you to elaborate more on this solution. So what we need to do is the vested quantity, which is the one that NBET assigned with the discos, they should be held to that quantity. And that quantity was set at 4,500 at privatization. Mm-hmm. The design was that outside the 4,500, the discos should sign a bilateral contract with the GENCOs to take extra quantities. Now, this is what is restricting us, because when you call a typical disco, they will say, this is my MITO allocation. The MITO allocation is strangulating the market. The MITO allocation is at 4,000.
You know what, Dr. Joy Ogaji, Kirian, there are issues here, some of it a bit technical for our viewers, but it is clear that they speak to the bottlenecks along the value chain. I'm just wondering, the Honorable Minister, I want to move away from some of these technical, Kirian, I want to move away from some of these slight technicalities and then just get into an area that you may need to help explain. There is, under the Federal Ministry of Power, the Rural Electrification Agency. Why should the federal government be responsible for rural electrification? And it turns out that in the past, that ROEA has been an avenue of sleaze. Some of the persons involved have been tried in the past on account of corruption and so on and so forth. I'm asking this question. What is the responsibility of state governments or even local governments if they cannot deal with rural electrification? Samuel Ogbemudia, when he was military governor of the old Bende, ran ROEB, that is Rural Electricity Board, and it was very efficient. Why is the federal government bothering about rural electrification when the bigger elephant on his head, is still wobbling to steady it?
Well, but we have to be worried. It is the responsibility of both the government, both federal and the state government. In the situation where the state government will tell you have no money to electrify villages, what do you do as a federal government? And you have to provide your people with electricity. And that is why, as a result, it's coming. So it is the responsibility of the REA now to make sure that all those that aren't served or the ones that are not served to be served with electricity. That is why we have to come in.
Kirian, I'll just make this point, Kirian. Just a point. But, I don't know how much supervision goes on. Because there are certain communities where the federal government, ROEA, is working to say we are electrifying, and then the state government also is saying that we are bringing electricity to that particular community. You see their cables on the same line.
Honorable Minister, the truth is that there is a lot of jobs to be done in terms of realignment, whatever that it is, because a situation where, as Kingsley explained, the federal government is doing the rural electrification, state government is doing the same thing. It's a duplication of efforts, and if a state government cannot do something about electrifying its localities, it's entirely a different matter. But I want you to come in here. I know you have touched it, initially, and that's the issue of Mambila, Kashimbila, and what have you. Bring us up to speed with the level of development in those two infrastructure, and that is one. Secondly, Honorable Minister, could there be a policy of government that will enable states, or if you like, regions, so to speak, to get involved in power, so that we will not concentrate on national grid, so that power can be in such a way that subnational governments can engage in power, so that by the time that is done, we reduce the bulk of what is on the Federal Minister of Power. Is this a possibility?
Yeah, it's very possible. Currently, what we are saying now, the 40% share of the government that we're talking about, 25% of it is mostly state government investment. But the problem is that the state government don't want to spend money also for the infrastructure. It is the responsibility of the federal government. That is why we are saying we are coming in through the cement. By the time we finish, we now assess the liquidity and then share the portion again.
Nobody Kashimbila and the Mambila power projects.
So they are also coming in. That is why I say by the time this is completed and commissioned, we are going to increase the generation of the power, the GenCo, with 30%. She is just telling you that it is still not enough with the generating. We still need more, and we're still looking for more investors to come for generation. The only problem we have is the misalignment. Once the alignment is corrected, and everything will flow, and then we will still need more investors to come.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Let's return to Oyebode Fanikpe via Skype. Mr. Fanikpe, of course, you've listened to all the arguments and the comments by the other guests on this issue. Exactly what are the other equity holders in the discos doing? Because we keep hearing that some discos reject power, they reject power. When is this going to be over? Are you as investors also sitting on your pants and waiting for another Siemens to come and help you out? What kind of investment are you also bringing on? Well, I don't know. Fadipe, you seem to have lost us, but it's a question I would like you to respond to because that's a critical aspect. Oh, I understand that. I understand we've lost him. Engineer Farouk Yabo, very quickly, what would you like to see the other equity holders in the discos do other than the government side? Very briefly.
Well, I think to create transparency within the market collections, I think that's the key issue. We must get to a level where the collections in the market are transparently displayed for everybody to see. And we have the advantage of technology to do that today. Now, having said that, I think 2 or 3 issues have been raised which are very apt. I think the issue of Siemens that was mentioned by Korean. I think it's good to understand that the Siemens is coming with funding, and the funds are going to be more or less convertible funds that could be eventually shareholders' loans that can be converted into equity. But the most important thing is to get the sector to be in a situation whereby expansion can go on. The Siemens program phase 1 is supposed to take us end-to-end 7,000 megawatts by the end of next year, and then end-to-end 11,000 megawatt by the end of year 2003, and then 25,000 megawatt by the year 2025. So I think if we can be able to address that would be a perfect thing. Also, the issue of Rural Education Agency was raised. You see, the concept and purpose of Rural Education Agency is captured in the Act. The source of funding has been defined, and the idea is really because government realized it cannot go on electrifying everywhere, and government also realized that the distribution companies or the private sector may not be interested in doing that. So government decides to set up a fund under the name of Rural Electrification Fund, which is going to be a counterpart support to either the state, the local government, or private sector. So I think if we are able to, just like the Honorable Minister is doing, and I think that's why he made some changes in REA.
All right, Engineer Farouk, we have to stop you there. And I'll also let you know that some individuals are also giving power to rural areas. There are some individuals who have done that, where I come from. So all these complexities concerning the power sector can be minimized, when certain policies are really put into practice. And at this point, we'd like to appreciate all of you for being part of our program this morning, especially, of course, the Honorable Minister who is coming here for the very first time. I want to thank him for sharing his thoughts and, of course, his time on this particular program. Honorable Minister of Power, Engineer Saleh Maman, it's been wonderful hosting you this morning. Thank you for coming. And Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo, you have so many titles, but I would just say you're the Acting Director of Renewable Energy and Rural Power Access. It's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Dr. Joy Ogadi, Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, thank you for coming. Of course, she brought in some technicalities that I didn't understand. Yeah, and via Skype, we had Oyebode Fadipe, Head Corporate Communications, Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. We also thank you for coming. It's on this note that we conclude today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kirian Umayo. Have a great day.
We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.